never expected that this would happen in the Arabic lands. It really was a dream.
It is the solidarity of the takers. You say, I want justice now for my people.
As time went going, I think the next step was to kill me.
A young girl's been dragged off to a private detention, secret detention centre, smashed around, brutally raped, bitten, and the men are in a frenzy when they're doing this.
I sat just to the rear of the first carriage, what turned out to be about probably 8 feet away from where the bomb went off. There is that instinct to run away and to save yourself, but at the same time it seems much stronger drive for people to override that and to go to the help of other people.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Professor Conor Gearty.
You know, an academic spots a bandwagon and they jump on. And DNA is fashionable, it explains everything. So here I am declaring that I can present to you the double helix of human rights. Watson, Crick, Gearty. University people are a little bit sniffy, I don't know if you knew this, about human rights. Because it involves people doing things who are not PhD students. And that's actually quite anxious-making for us. We weren't the most sociable people in school. We're not used to interaction. That's why we lurk in the ivory tower, sharing moments of silence with each other. Human rights, surely it's kind of simple. You don't need to elaborate anything special about it. Well, today is about working out what it means and trying to get to the bottom of it. So let's have a think about what human right really matters to you. The most basic, the most fundamental. Let's have some hands up. There's a hand up, yes. The right to life we have in the front here. We have a bid from the lady in the middle. Freedom of speech. Do we have any more? You won the front, do you? Freedom of speech. Freedom of expression. We have a gentleman up there.
Freedom of belief.
Freedom of belief. This gentleman here.
Education.
Education. Education, sir, are you educated?
I used to teach myself.
Oh, I see, so it's simply self-interest, isn't it? It's give us a job, it's the right to work. How much would you say first level primary school education?
Yes, right through to 18, I think.
Right through, why stop at 18, sir, you violator of human rights? What about the university?
Tolerate those, I think.
PhDs?
Yes.
Excellent, you see, it's expanding. Where are we going to get the money for this?
Well, that is a burning issue, isn't it?
Yeah, well, when we haven't a clue what the answer is, we say that's a burning issue. Thank you, thank you. The freedom of expression, there's a freedom of expression guy right in the front row. Why do you care about freedom of expression?
Well, I'm thinking particularly of the Chinese artist Ai Weiwei and how China seems to be taking freedoms back.
And how far would you go with freedom of expression? If I began now to engage in an hysterical anti-Semitic rant, would you defend me and say, there he is, right to free speech, I'm going to protect him?
I would.
You would, and supposing somebody were to shout fire right behind you and everybody tumbled over you and you were being destroyed in the rush to get out, you in your dying breath, even though there was no fire, would say, good, I die in defense of absolute human rights, would you?
I might not go that far. But
you might not go that far, so there are all exceptions.
Social contract that allows government and everything else.
All right, so the rights only count if something called Big Brother, the social contract, decides they count. Thank you very much. Now, how many human rights do you think we have? How many do we have? 5? 10? Any bids? 20? 100? 55,000? How can we tell what a human right is? Have you thought about that? And can you have them without enjoying them? Did Stone Age man have a right to social security? Because the right to social security is in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's an absolute, inalienable. It's there since the start of time. Well, would have made a difference facilitated the invention of the wheel? And are human rights true? Are they there, or are they what we decide are true? We're going to travel to the future through trying to understand where we are, the present, and we get to that through better understanding the past. That's our menu. TV people are very keen on props. So we're going to get to know this little doll because it represents layers of stuff. And we're going to work through to the very core of this doll in our search for what it really means to talk about human rights. And we're going to encounter staging posts which are valuable and important, but we're also going to encounter false friends, those who would distort it for their own interests. So we have to also discount and remove the false friends that lurk within this doll. Let's have a look at this.
The idea of human rights just came up to my mind when I passed a very bad experience after the war, when I lost some of my members in my family, when I lost friends. I started to understand, what does a human right mean?
When you say that you began to understand what human rights mean, what do human rights mean to you?
Human rights are not these things that given to you. These are things that no one can take from you. It's just kind of something inherent in every human being. Everyone should have these human rights. We are all equal. We are born free. No one has priority because of his color, because of his religion, because of anything. No discrimination. It is an idea which is inherited.
Not everybody agrees with what we just heard. So let's come to and encounter the first of our, I would say, false layers, but it's for you to reflect on and think about. And the argument goes something like this. Human rights is a Western idea. Nothing to do with the rest of the world. It's a kind of cultural accessory to a particular place at a particular time. And therefore it's irrelevant. Now, what I reject is the idea that we are the only people in the show, and I think of myself here as a Westerner, who actually care about human rights. And I remind myself of David Kato, the Ugandan gay rights campaigner, brutally murdered for his activism recently. He didn't do that because he'd learned it in some Western manual. And I think, too, of Pakistan, poor benighted Pakistan. The lawyers rallied to protect their Chief Justice. They didn't do that because they had all gone to some Western college and been brainwashed in beliefs rooted in the rule of law. I would think most of all of Tunis, think of Cairo, Egypt, think of what's going on in Libya, think of Bahrain. Don't just think of the successes, think of the people who might be losing. Think of Syria, and you see people who are not mimicking their Western betters, but using the language of human rights, or a kind of human rights language, to articulate something which is in them, and to deny it is to reject their humanity. And also, and now we have collude again, who's at LSE and MSc in human rights. He's an architect who became engaged in human rights, and who's from Gaza in Palestine. This is what collude has to say on this topic in particular. When you see Tunis, Cairo, Bahrain, Libya more recently, and even Syria and other places. How do you respond to that? What is the effect of it on you?
I would like to talk about as Arabic citizen. It really was a dream. I never expected that this would happen in the Arabic lands because, as I mentioned before, it is the culture. We have to be silent because we used to be silent. The silence is the culture in the Arabic lands. So uprising and all of these conflicts in the Arabic lands gave me a good impression, a good area, a good perspective for a good future. I started to be optimistic, and I hope that it will be just like infection to distribute the infection to the other lands around and to the neighbors, and specifically in Palestine.
An infection of human dignity.
Exactly.
Many of the protesters say that these protests are exactly about human dignity.
Exactly. Yes, because actually the most important motivation for defending the human rights is to feel that you're losing your respect and losing your dignity. And that was actually, I think that was the only reason for the uprising in the Egyptian lands, because it was a matter of dignity. Because when someone just coming and preach you right, and when degrading your dignity, I think you will be something else. There is a power and energy inside each one of us, and you need anything just to express about this power and energy inside you. Yes, it is a matter of dignity, and it's a matter of respect to your humanity.
And Collude is just here in the front row. So I think with the help of Collude and others, I think we can send human rights, this is another prop, human rights as a Western construct into the bin. But we can recover from what we've just seen what I'd say are a couple of layers of truth about human rights. One, a belief in democracy. We mustn't let the idea of democracy to be taken over by imperialists. Democracy is a fantastic idea, but to make democracy work, you need dignity. And one of the things that came through from those people in the Arab countries, in Pakistan, and David Kato, is a determination to be themselves and not to allow authority to destroy them, even if it meant seeming to destroy them. But we need to think a little bit, as I said we would, about the past. We've got 4 stages in history. Let's say through some amazing coincidence of alphabetical prowess, they all begin with R. What do you think our first stage is? Begins with R, start of human rights. Any bids? Rodeo? No! Religion. Now we have the idea of right and wrong rooted in religion. And sometime in the past, 16th, 15th century, beginning with religious people, we begin to develop the notion of subjective right. It's not only that you have a right out there, you have a right in here, a right to be treated as a human. And that idea grows within religious cultures and is, of course, then a central idea in the Enlightenment when we construct a secular ethic to substitute for the religious one in which we had no longer any confidence. No longer taking our instructions from God, we take our instructions from ourselves. But interestingly, the instructions turn out to be quite similar. Immanuel Kant swats away in the little village he was in, never leaving it, and comes up with, after years and years of active cogitation, the Sermon on the Mount. Good man, Immanuel. The second R. Guns, violence, Human rights has grown out of revolution. There are two kinds. Freedom from external oppression, the right to self-determination. And that self is not you or me, it is a people. And it's a very valuable part of world history because it's given bits of the world that were dominated and whose assets were expropriated a language with which to resist that expropriation. There's a different kind of revolution. It's revolution against those who are inside, against your own plundering kleptocracy. And of course, the French led the way on that with 1789 and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. The South Africans most recently have demonstrated that to great effect, and Egypt appears to be on the same track. I say appears in Libya, I say appears because one has to wait to see what happens as a result of these great changes. Is it revolution or is it reorganization? Our third R basically is there because I had to get another R in or they would have shouted at me. And it's sort of implausible. Reconstruction of humanity. I know. Rodeo is more likely, you would say. But I'm actually getting at something quite important, which is the way in the 19th century we got familiar with the idea that a slave could not conceivably be treated in the way that slaves had hitherto been treated. That there was something about a person who was owned by another person that was intensely morally objectionable. That's a huge moral advance, which is reconstructing the human because it's getting us, and this is a key point about human rights as far as I'm concerned, to see the human in humans generally and not specifically. At the same time in the 19th century, as a result of reactions to the horrors of the wars in the 1850s, and in particular the American Civil War, there grew an idea of a code of good behavior in a war. So your enemy who is surrendering is to be treated as a fallen comrade. And the fourth is easier, rights law. Rights law, and in particular, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These historical layers show us a consistent theme, which I will think of as a truthful layer in our subject. And that is the layer which promotes courage and compassion for all of humanity. A vision of humanity which is all-encompassing, which is what I think human rights is about. Now, I want to introduce a note of caution because there are downsides to this subject, and I have an ideal person to talk about this with, and he's a friend of mine who works at Birkbeck College, University of London, Professor Conor. And Costas is an human rights enthusiast, for sure, but he's from a tradition which is pretty skeptical of imperialism and pretty anxious about self-congratulation. And before we settle into an over-optimistic view that we are the elect living this moral life as human rights people, we need to hear what Costas Disnus has to say. What do human rights mean to you?
Human rights today is the manifestation of the human urge to resist public and private domination and exploitation. When people feel that there is injustice in the world, that the way that political power acts is wrong, then human rights comes into operation.
Where does this set of words come from? Why human rights?
That's an excellent question, and I think there's quite a lot of confusion around the term human rights because they become so all-encompassing. For us here in the North, human rights are about protecting a sphere of private interest and private activity, around ourselves, and keeping people out. So that will appear in a number of different guises as privacy, as free speech, and so on. For people in the South and for the underprivileged and the poor and those who have been persecuted here in the North, human rights is precisely a way through which they can fight for a minimum recognition of their humanity, and also for a minimum recognition that a law without social justice is like a body without a soul. We wouldn't have any of these social and economic rights without struggle. They were not just given away, you know, as gifts by the powerful.
It's a case then of winning the struggle.
That kind of relationship has changed because human rights have been to a certain extent hijacked by governments, particularly the major powers in the Western world, which use them in order to impose their own ways of social and political arrangement to the rest of the world under that rather fake claim of humanitarian intervention. The use of human rights in order to go to Iraq or Afghanistan is for me the greatest contradiction in terms. We are killing humans in order to save humanity.
I think we need to acknowledge something quite challenging. All powerfully emancipatory ideas get sucked into a vortex of power which seeks not to remove them, but to twist their meaning to suit the powerful. Have a look at this. In conformity with the interests of the people, the citizens are guaranteed by law freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, including the holding of mass meetings, freedom of street processions and demonstrations. Any bids on which country that is? Oh, you're good LSE people, you smell a rat. What did I hear over here?
Syria.
Syria, it could be Syria, it could stand for Syria. Any other guesses? Burma. Burma's pretty close. The constitution, I remember the ambassador from the Soviet Union so impressing me with when he came to university in Dublin that I practically became not so much a communist as a citizen of the Soviet Empire. This is the Soviet achievement. Or the next one. Every citizen shall have the right to freedom of thought and of conscience and to freely profess any religion. Every citizen shall have the right freely to take part in political, social, class and mass organizations, etc. The state shall provide necessary assistance. This gives you a bit of a hint. Necessary assistance to the people to enable them to enjoy. We're spotting a rat there. The state's helping you to enjoy your rights. Well, this, sir, say it again, you call it Burma. They call it Myanmar. Oh, we're democratic. We have elections. We don't let anybody we don't like stand. But we have elections. Give us the money, give us the money. And then we have some curious humanitarians. It is impossible to stand by and watch millions belonging to a great and ancient civilized people be denied rights by their government. I have determined, therefore, lucky them, to place the help of our country at the service of these millions. Well, any bids? You'll have heard of this leader. He was a distinguished author in the 1920s. Yes, Adolf Hitler. No wonder Costas is a little bit anxious about grand interventions, because we've had recent examples, of course, but we have this example, and it's a reminder to us of the risk in translating our moral certainty into murder. Into murder. We need to encounter a new layer of falsity. It works like this. You say, yeah, human rights is part of our culture. You know, we do human rights. We do democracy. And we do the rule of law. The we is the West. You know, whatever you call the West, capital W, global North, or whatever. That's stage one. Stage two, we are lovely. But we are so lovely, we are letting a whole lot of people in who are not lovely at all, and they are carrying suitcases with weapons of mass destruction. And they appear to have devoted their lives to our destruction. And we let them in. There are special bits at the airport which go, people who want to kill us, no visa needed. The ticking time bomb. The ticking time bomb is the well-known example of a situation where you know somebody has information which can save thousands of lives, and the only way you can get that information out of them is by torture. And the big ethical question is whether you torture. Well, Osama bin Laden. There's a guy in Guantanamo. He knows where Osama is, or he can get you to Osama. Osama bin Laden's the leader of this terrible organization, you'd think, and you will torture. And that's been an argument that has percolated to the surface. My point is, that is an argument that is sometimes embraced by people who see themselves as human rights people because it's defending our culture, defending our values. And then the other tactic, of course, is to say you don't do torture, you do coercive interrogation. Or you could go for authorized torture via the wonderful legal system of which we are so proud, argued for by many distinguished human rights professors, the judicial warrants system. So I'm going to enter into a little fairy story here with you about judicial warrants. We need a torture victim volunteer. We need one, and I fortunately have prepared one earlier. So can we have a torture victim? Now the torture victim comes over here. Can you put your handcuffs on, please? The torture victim has a lawyer, but the lawyer never talks to the torture victim. The lawyer is completely uninterested in the torture victim because the lawyer, of course, is a servant of the court. And the lawyer's duty is to put the case as to why there should be torture on behalf of the torture victim, but without taking instructions from the torture victim because of course, national security. Of course, overseeing the whole process, the judge. And to complete the picture of human rights safeguards, you'd have the doctor. And this is how it would go. My Lord will be aware of the evidence which has been given in private before my Lord, that there has been strong suspicion that the suspect has been engaged in acts of massive terrorist atrocity and is likely to continue to do so in the near future, my Lord. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the fate of London is at stake. My Lord has seen the letter from the Home Secretary which says, and I quote the letter in its totality, "Dear Judge, give us the warrant." My Lord will be aware that for national security reasons it's not appropriate to go much further than that. I see. Have we got the relevant medical safeguards in place? I would like the doctor to give direct evidence on that. My Lord, I've been a doctor now for some 37 years, and I've not been a particularly successful doctor, so I've ended up working in the realm of national security, and I give an absolute assurance. My Lord, that this person will almost certainly not die as a result of the procedure, my Lord. And then the judge pronounces judgment. Well, the matter seems clear enough. There is a massive threat to the state. The evidence is outstanding, and on the basis of the affidavit from the witness, the Home Secretary, the torture may proceed for a period of 2 days, interspersed with occasional breaks. Biscuits shall be given with 1 cup of tea and a spoon of sugar. The distinguished doctor of long experience will obey his Hippocratic oath in ensuring the ongoing life of the suspect until such time as she doth break. You are now led away. Thank you. Can we give our torture victim a round of applause? Now, that is what would happen in fact. Because if you create a structure for abuse and you allow for a formal set of safeguards, which then are handed over to professionals, you can be pretty sure that the effect, given the nature of the personnel, given the exigencies of the situation, given the lack of any genuine political oversight, given the power of the language of terrorism, that very soon it'll become normal to get warrants as and when. That's been our experience when it's come to the extension of powers in the field of terrorism in every other way, and I don't see why it wouldn't be here. So what we have is a very dangerous false friend, and the very dangerous false friend is the whole idea of necessary evil. We risk our culture if we collude in the idea that our culture is so valuable that we can afford to depart from it in order to secure it. And so rigorously into the bin is this idea that human rights can underpin violations of human rights. On the front line, the reality of torture and the ongoing concern we have about torture is a million miles away from university seminar rooms which hypothesize about ticking time bombs.
Family member on that time. She was a humanitarian lawyer. She made a report about the genocide in the east of Congo. Unfortunately, in that report, she cited people in the government. And then from that time, persecution began. 1 week later, she went out of the country. And then 2 weeks later, I was arrested. And there began the torture.
Before September 11th, there was a general consensus around the world that torture was an abhorrent practice, that it was never permissible, and governments sought to deny and to conceal cases where they engaged in torture. And after September 11th, we began to see, led by Western governments, an effort to suggest that there were circumstances in which torture was acceptable. Indeed, circumstances in which torture was a moral obligation in order to obtain information that could be used to save lives.
During these 9 months, in the first 3 months, I think, torture were all the time. I knew that when it's 5 o'clock that I will be beaten up, I will be put in such condition that in such a severe pain that I have to answer questions which were put to me from government officials.
I see on a regular basis people from all around the world who've been severely tortured in their own country, which can affect how they can interact with other people and everyday aspects of their life. Difficulties with sleeping, severe anxiety, depression, suicidal attempts, shame and humiliation, and a sense of powerlessness. I think it's terrible in the sense that after 9/11 there's been this debate and actual actions of people being tortured in the West, which I think has undermined our values. And people who have come from these countries are amazed that we have so easily given up the freedoms which we've fought so hardly for.
How long did it last?
Oh, could last 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, depending on my answer, depending on my condition, depending on many things.
What do you think was going through their minds?
Ooh. Pleasure, duty, or both?
Human rights law makes clear that the best way to deal with the threat of terrorism, as other criminal activity, is through the criminal justice system. Policies are being pursued that have undermined human rights protection, undermined the rule of law, and indeed have undermined the reputation of Britain and other European countries around the world, have made those countries appear to be hypocritical when they profess to stand for certain principles.
Patients that have come here and they're saying, well, you know, how dare the West talk to us about human rights and how torture is a bad thing when they're doing it themselves. If it's so necessary for their security, then it's all right for us to do it.
In the beginning, I had the sense that they didn't want to kill me. They did want to put me in very, very severe pain to extract what they want to know. But as time were going, I think the next step was to kill me. Yeah.
Young girls been dragged off to a private detention, secret detention centre, smashed around, brutally raped, bitten, And the men are in a frenzy when they're doing this. And then you've got another type that clients have talked about where, in a sense, they were in a prison in Iran, the guards were raping them on a fairly regular basis, and the guards wanted them to love them, wanted the women to actually say that they were enjoying this sort of thing. And on one occasion, one person, to appease his religious sensibility, got her to sign a sigay so that they were temporarily married while he did these sexually violent acts. So he felt he wasn't doing something wrong in terms of his religion, but forget about what he was doing to this woman.
Some people say they're against torture, but they want to manage torture. They might suggest, for example, doctors being present to protect the victim from too much torture. Or they might be pushing for some kind of lawyer's presence in the form of maybe a judicial warrant. Is this, to you, a fair compromise between, on the one hand, the prohibition on torture, and on the other hand, the supposed concerns of those committed to national security?
Well, first of all, I think that the idea of judicializing illegal conduct seems contradictory. Torture dehumanizes, it debases the torturer, and it also does the same to society. And providing a veneer of the rule of law to what is the most dehumanizing form of treatment cannot serve to change its fundamental character.
What would you say, or what would you do if you, bizarrely, came across your torturer here in the United Kingdom, at university maybe, or just on the street?
I will just call authority and report him.
So you'd like him punished by the law, not by you or a gang, but by law?
Exactly.
So you believe in law?
Yes.
Raphael's here. We're beginning to kind of wind up, you know. We're glimpsing a future that we have to resist. A future in which casual abuses become the norm within the framework of a spuriously constructed democratic law. How do we stop that? We stop that by having people like Dr. Hopkins, Ben Ward, many, many others, and people like Raphael, and people like collude. Because what we see is something pretty special, which is an extraordinary sense, which some of us share maybe to some extent, but which drives us as human rights people, a sense of solidarity. Solidarity with the human race, a commitment to a common project, which is not one in which we distinguish people by their color, by their gender, by the size of their wallet, by their nationality, by their fortune, but which sees in them humanity. It's part of the ways in which we have learnt from religion. And this takes us close to, but not quite at, where we end. Because we have this solidarity, but we also have this awareness that it is not just to give, it is the solidarity of the takers. The brave people who do not wait for some generous person to come along and serve them up justice, but who say, I want justice now for my people. That's a different kind of solidarity. It goes with dignity, courage, a commitment to democracy, compassion, and these are the building blocks that take us to the core of human rights. But it's also about something in the human, something which is irrepressible about the human spirit, which is linked to that, which drives that solidarity. What you're going to see now is somebody who captures some of what I think is at the core of human rights, in a way that not everybody would immediately assume is the case. But let's see what Suzanne Pell has to say.
On the morning of the 7th of July, I was doing work experience. I'd taken a day's holiday to go and do work experience in the city for a job I ultimately got. And I was getting a Circle Line train and, of course, running late. Nearly got onto the second carriage, which was actually where the bomb went off. I sat just to the rear of the first carriage, what turned out to be about probably 8 feet away from where the bomb went off, but luckily screened, protected by the partition between the two carriages, but at the same time very close, so when the glass blew out and the doors blew through, I was sort of in the thick of it. I woke up in absolute, darkness. I couldn't see. I had so much debris on my eyes, I had to sort of scrape it off and open my eyes and still couldn't see because it was so dark and just black and sooty, and we couldn't breathe, and you just were struggling for breath. No one could really hear because all our eardrums had been blasted, so it was just this sort of hissing new world that you found yourself in. We could start to hear screams, people in the next carriage, the bomb carriage, crying out for help, crying out for medics. And we all just sort of looked at each other going, what should we do? Is anyone a doctor? It's like, no. But I just thought, we've still got to do something. So didn't take long, didn't hesitate, just did what we had to do. And we pushed through, went into the next carriage. It was black, we only had the light from the parallel carriage, and it was incredibly dusty, and the whole state of the carriage had completely changed. It was mangled metal, it was nothing that you would recognise to be a train, and there were bodies everywhere, lots of bodies, lots of bags, lots of torn up seats, metal, doors, everything was distorted and crazy, and I could see one body where clothes had been blown off. It was just sheer horror. I just moved on and helped the people I thought needed helping. And at that point, the chaps who'd been with me at the front of the carriage, who were just inside the door, had called through and said, "We can get out. We can escape the carriage which we've been trapped in." So I sort of tried to signal to people. I tried to call out, "Is there anyone in this carriage? Anyone well enough to walk? Anyone can get up? Come with us." No one responded because no one could hear a thing. All their ears are gone. And I just signed to the people immediately in front of me, ready, go. And they just suddenly woke up from this sort of shell shock state and just, I just walked out of the tube and there were injured everywhere, police everywhere, bomb squad people. It was a crazy scene. And I just walked out and it was bright and it hit me. I was sort of felt relieved for the first time. I had the ability to kind of indulge in my own feelings, and I just felt this huge wave of emotion, and it was just a huge emotional outlet, and I just burst into tears and was just like, oh my God, and just cried and cried and cried. So many people that day did so many amazing things, whether they were public service people whose job it was to do, the bomb squads, to the sniffer dogs, but also the driver, everyone and all the passengers on that train, and the parallel train, most importantly, the sheer effort, spirit, selflessness of people who, despite all that instinct saying fight, flight, get away from this danger, they thought, no, I will go to it. And they left their train, which was safe and secure, relatively, and boarded our train. There is that instinct to run away and to save yourself, but at the same time it seems much stronger drive for people to override that and to go to the help of other people. And some people find that so surprising and incomprehensible, but I think it's more extraordinary not to have done anything when there was so much distress, hurt, people were dying, people were bleeding to death. The thought that you would not do anything in that situation, I find, I wouldn't be able to understand that.
And Sam's here as well. I don't suppose you think of yourself as a human rights worker. What we heard about this instinct to save yourself and then some kind of stronger drive to override that and just go to the help of other people. And I see this idea which is linked to the irrepressibility of our spirit, which is unavoidable in what we are, in some kind of mysterious way, as the very core of what our subject's about. We're driven to engage in this energetic, empathetic solidarity. And we're either lucky in life and offer to others, or we're unlucky in life and we push on behalf of ourselves and others. But they're united by this common, intuitive commitment to reaching out. And that's what we are. And that is what makes us, in the end, for all the pressures, a human rights culture. And the rest of it falls into place as part of that. Now, I'm going to leave the last word to Raphael, and this is what he's had to say about the future. Some people say that human rights activists are naive.
No, that's why I'm doing law, actually. It's not about naivety, it's about conviction. It's about justice. It's about greatness. That is human right. If we can achieve at least 50% of what is in the Convention treaties on human rights, I don't think that we will have the world as we know today. We will have a better place. That is the conviction behind human rights. It's not about naivety.
So there you are, guys. There's no dull. It's just a few notes. You know what the props are for. You've got Western idea and necessary evil in the bin, and you've got very human rights to have the smallest, the most powerful. We're not largest. You've got underlying ideas about human rights, and at the bottom, you've got our instinct to reach out, the DNA of human rights. Thank you very much.